Shocking truth, CEO who never smiled for 20 years finds joy in secretary's song at midnight, in a dimly lit boardroom high above the glowing city, something utterly bizarre had just erupted. Jonathan Sterling, the stoic CEO known for his stone-cold demeanor and a face that hadn't cracked a smile in 2 decades, was suddenly alive with an emotion he'd long buried. Peering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the moon bathed the room in silver light, casting eerie shadows as he leaned forward, eyes widening like saucers. What could possibly stir such a hard-hearted man at this hour? The clock ticked menacingly, each second building suspense as the unmistakable sound of music floated through the air, a haunting melody from somewhere deep inside the building, resonant and sweet, as if even the walls yearned to join in. As he sat there, heart racing, head spinning with memories of corporate meetings and endless spreadsheets, the music crescendoed. A voice so captivating it could coax a smile from a statue was floating up from the depths of the office, spiraling into the night, wrapping around his frigid heart like a warm blanket. Who was singing? Eyes darting, he longed to know, yet he hesitated. What if the ground shook beneath him? What if he discovered something that changed everything? The night echoed with uncertainty. Had he been oblivious to such beauty all these years? Had his relentless pursuit of success blotted out the glorious human connections that once drove him? As he grappled with this realization, shadows danced along the walls, amplifying a sense of foreboding. Each note drifted further into his mind, urging him to find its origin, a siren-'s call beckoning him closer, igniting a candle's flicker of hope in his chest. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. But the music continued, weaving through his thoughts, each note intertwining with fear and anticipation, pulling him from the shadows of despair into a realm of almost childlike curiosity. He rose slowly, as if every movement was a battle, and approached the door, which seemed to pulsate with the rhythm of the song. What could this mystery hold? Who was the angelic voice whispering secrets to the night, and what magic could it revive within him? He was teetering on the brink, ready to unlock a new chapter or plunge into the dark depths of the unknown. As he reached for the handle, a shiver ran down his spine. Would he find joy waiting on the other side, or something far more unsettling? As Jonathan's fingers brushed against the cool metal of the doorknob, an electric pulse raced through him. It felt as if the door was alive, vibrating with energy. The song swelled, wrapping around him like a reassuring embrace. For the first time in many years, he felt a longing, a desire to be part of something greater than the network of financial reports and quarterly investments that had consumed his life. Taking a deep breath, he twisted the knob and stepped through the threshold. The sudden brightness of the adjoining room swallowed him whole. It was an open space, painted in warm hues that clashed with the cold steel of his boardroom prison. In the center stood Clara, his secretary, illuminated like an ethereal being, her voice weaving magic in the air. The song had drawn him here, deep into the heart of the building. As he approached, Jonathan noticed her eyes were closed, lost in the melody. Clara's presence hummed with an energy that was vastly different from the sterile vibe of corporate offices. It sparked something alive within him, something he thought he had locked away long ago, but the moment Clara opened her eyes, her surprise mirrored his. The song faltered as she saw him, her expression shifting from pure joy to disbelief. The world shrank into silence, the vibrant notes hanging in the air like an unfulfilled promise. Jonathan stood, frozen in the glory of a candid reality he hadn't embraced in years. Mr. Sterling? She stammered, stepping back almost imperceptibly. Something shifted in the space between them, fear, anticipation, an undercurrent of vulnerability. Clara, he managed, the uncharacteristic softness of his voice startling even him. I didn't know you could sing like that. Surprised by his own words, he watched as her cheeks flushed a deep crimson. It wasn't just the compliment but the underlying current that connected them now, a bridge from CEO to something far more human. Yet, even in this unexpected moment, anxiety crept back into Jonathan's thoughts. This was dangerous. Emotional clarity could lead to vulnerability, and vulnerability in his world was a risk he never dared take. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Before he could form another thought, the shadows in the room shifted, and the atmosphere turned stale. From behind Clara, a figure emerged from the darkness, a tall man clad in a crisp suit, his face shadowed but his demeanor commanding. Jonathan's heart raced. David, the company's vice president, had an agenda of his own. "Jonathan, we need to talk," David said, his words slicing through the intimacy of the moment. The tension crackled, heated with unspoken implications and rivalry. Jonathan's mind raced, parsing through David's expression for the secret he feared might unravel everything he had built. "Now," Jonathan managed, glancing between Clara and David, the warmth of the moment dissipating like smoke in the wind. "Yes, now," David insisted, stepping closer, his voice a low rumble. "It can't wait. There are consequences to your actions tonight." But before Jonathan could question what that meant, Clara echoed his fears with a soft gasp. "What do you mean?" she asked, her eyes darting back to Jonathan, seeking reassurance amidst the encroaching darkness. "Things are changing, and we need to address the fallout before it's too late," David said, his stare unwavering on Jonathan, the weight of 1,000 implications hanging between them. Suddenly, Jonathan felt the walls closing in. The melody that had briefly illuminated his world was now drowning in the pressure of corporate loyalty, ambition, and fears he had kept hidden. With Clara's concerned gaze upon him, Jonathan knew he stood at a precipice. Here was a chance to embrace joy or to bury himself back into the shadows. What would he choose? Just as Jonathan took a step forward, chaos erupted outside, a cacophony of voices, shouts ringing from the stairwell. Was there a fire? An emergency? His heart thumped anxiously as he exchanged a glance with Clara, her face filled with dread. What danger loomed just outside this moment of revelation? Would the secrets buried in their lives drown out the music entirely? In that split second, standing between hope and fear, Jonathan realized his journey was far from over. As he turned, ready to confront the chaos, a chilling thought crossed his mind: was it already too late to change the course of his life? The outburst outside felt like an earthquake, shaking the foundations of Jonathan's newfound resolve. His body tensed, every instinct screaming for clarity while panic tugged at the edges of the intimate moment with Clara. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in around him, as if locking away their fragile connection for good. What's happening? Clara's voice trembled, a whisper that seemed to slice through the din of chaos outside. Her wide eyes locked onto Jonathan's, shimmering with both fear and something unspoken, a yearning that had sparked between them just moments ago. I don't know, Jonathan replied, the breath hitching in his throat. Every part of him wanted to reach for her, to shield her from whatever storm was brewing. Instead, he felt trapped in the cool, sterile world he had climbed from, only to find it all collapsing back in on him. David! He snapped, drawing his gaze back to the vice president, who stood like a statue, face unreadable. What the hell is going on? The finance reports, they triggered something. Stock prices are tanking, rumors are spreading. Someone's leaked information, David replied, his voice tight. He glanced quickly toward Clara, then back to Jonathan. We need to get ahead of this, now. Jonathan felt a surge of anger, mixing with the urgency of the situation. The melodies that had momentarily filled his spirit now felt like a distant memory. The company's lifeblood was at stake, and with it, his precariously balanced existence. Great. Just what I need, he replied, sarcasm wearing thin on his tongue. Is this it? Are you willing to sacrifice everything for whispers in the dark? The board won't let that happen, David said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to an urgent hiss. It's them or us, Jonathan. If we don't act fast, we'll lose not just our positions but everything we've built. Clara's breath caught again, the air thick with tension. Jonathan looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, he remembered what it felt like to find light in the midst of darkness. "Stay here," he said softly, against the roar of possible disaster. Without waiting for her response, he whirled back to David. "What's the plan?" "I'm contacting the board members, but we need to put out a statement." And David hesitated, eyes narrowing. "And you need to show confidence. They can't see us faltering." Confidence. The word echoed in Jonathan's mind. The very thing he had chased his entire life now seemed like a hollow promise. Did he even have it in him? Could he gather the scraps of courage left in this moment? Just then, a loud crash echoed from the stairs, drowning out Jonathan's thoughts. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, eyes widening in horror. "What was that?" she whispered, moving closer to Jonathan, the threat palpable. Jonathan's heart raced, urgency pressing against him like the walls of this confining yet strangely liberating space. He stepped toward the door, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "I need to find out." "Stay here," he told Clara, knowing the risk but also feeling the pulse of something greater than just fear. He needed answers that could either bind him back into corporate chains or free him to finally embrace the life he hadn't dared to pursue. As he opened the door and took a step into the unknown chaos, a loud voice shouted, "Get back! Everyone, there's no time to waste." He froze, his heart racing. What had he stepped into? Behind him, Clara gasped. But his mind was already racing ahead. Was this the disaster that threatened to rip apart everything he had ever known? They had stumbled onto something darker, and it was hunting them down. Jonathan turned slowly, glancing back at Clara, her face a mix of anxiety and something that looked a lot like determination. He knew now, they were in this together, even if the world around them was spiraling into chaos, and as he ventured into the storm, a new thought crossed his mind: maybe in the chaos, they would find a way to finally break free. What awaited them beyond the door? Would they be swept away or find a way to fight back? As Jonathan stepped out, he was hit by an overwhelming wave of sound, sharp cries, frantic shouts, and the unmistakable clatter of chaos unfolding. In that moment, it felt like stepping into a different world, one where the air was thick with fear and uncertainty. "Get to safety!" someone yelled. The voice was muffled, lost in the frenzy of the crowd rushing through the hall. Jonathan's instincts screamed at him to retreat, to return to Clara, but something deeper pushed him forward. He moved through the throng of bodies, bypassing the growing confusion as more employees poured in from the outside. Faces were twisted in shock, panic swirled around him, and he could hardly grasp what was happening. He spotted David, gesturing wildly, eyes darting from one person to another. "Jonathan!" David called, finally spotting him through the haze. "We have to." A heavy thud echoed again, this time accompanied by a sudden flash of fear. Jonathan turned towards the noise, his stomach dropping as he realized it was coming from the building's main entrance. He pushed through the frantic crowd, heart pounding, and peered around a corner. What he saw made the blood drain from his face. Two men in suits, faces grim, were trying to direct some people away from the entrance. But chaos erupted when a young intern, wide-eyed with terror, burst through the doorway and collided into them. A moment later, a loud crash resonated, and a glass door shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. "Lock it down!" one of the suited men barked, his voice rising above the din. "Get everyone inside!" Jonathan's mind was racing. Who were these men? Why did it seem like they were trying to control the chaos rather than help? And the fear in that intern's eyes, he felt it, a reflection of everything he had experienced in this place. Was this disaster the culmination of corporate greed? A long brewing storm unleashed? He turned to find David at his side, the urgency back in his voice. "We need to get to the boardroom. That's where the decision makers will be, where we can find out what the hell is really going on here." "What about Clara?" Jonathan's voice cracked slightly. He couldn't forget about her, not now when everything was so chaotic. She's safe. We can't help her if they shut the building down or worse. David urged, grabbing Jonathan by the shoulder. We move now. Jonathan hesitated, glancing back towards the room where Clara had been, where they had shared whispered hopes and dreams moments before the world outside had collided into their reality. Okay, he said, forcing his feet to move. Together, they fought their way through the chaos, desperately dodging people as they pushed toward the boardroom. With each step, the tension in the air seemed to thicken, wrapping around them like a vice. This wasn't just about saving their jobs, it was weaving a new reality, one that felt both fragile and powerful. As they reached the boardroom, Jonathan felt a sense of impending dread. What awaited them behind those doors? Was it going to be a meeting about damage control or a confrontation that could incite further panic? The door loomed ahead, both a barrier and a doorway to what could be their salvation or their doom. Ready? David asked, glancing at Jonathan, his expression steely. Jonathan took a deep breath, trying to summon the confidence he had been lacking. Yeah. Let us do this. With one final push, Jonathan gripped the handle and pulled the door open. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Board members loomed with anxious expressions, eyes darting nervously. The tension was electric, and the moment he crossed the threshold, every gaze fell on him. Would he seize this chance to lead them through the storm, or was he stepping into the eye of a hurricane that would devour all trust and hope? Then, right at that moment, the phone on the conference table buzzed ominously. Jonathan's heart lurched as the room fell silent, all eyes now on the ringing device. He hesitated, dread pooling in his gut. What was this? A call for help, a warning, or something even darker? Before he could process it, the phone stopped ringing, and in its wake, a heavy silence descended. And that silence whispered of truths yet to unfold, secrets lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be exposed. What awaited on the other end of the line? Would it bring clarity or further chaos into their lives? The stillness in the room was suffocating, as if the air itself had thickened under the weight of unspoken words. Jonathan stood frozen, caught between the haunted looks of the board members and the ominous phone that had stolen their breath. He could feel David's hand grip his shoulder tighter, a silent push to move forward, but his feet felt glued to the floor. Someone answer it, a board member finally said, her voice trembling slightly. The nervous murmur of agreement rippled through the room, but Jonathan remained still, battling a surge of panic. What could this call mean for them? I will. A tall man with sharp features, sporting a slick-back hairstyle and an expensive suit, stepped forward. Jonathan recognized him as Ethan Grayson, the company's CEO, a name that resonated with authority, though it mostly echoed with disdain from the staff. The man had built an empire and a reputation of stone-cold indifference, as if he thrived on the fear his presence inspired. Ethan picked up the phone, his brow furrowing as he listened intently. Oddly, Jonathan noticed that the CEO's expression shifted subtly, flickering between irritation and intrigue. Everyone's breath hitched in collective anticipation. Jonathan exchanged glances with David, who looked equally anxious. How could they trust the man who had always seemed devoid of compassion? What do you mean? Ethan finally uttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Questions surged through Jonathan's mind. What could Ethan have on the other end? A secret agenda to save face? Or perhaps even an emergency he had carefully orchestrated? Then, suddenly, a loud bang erupted from behind the closed doors of the meeting room. The sound shook the walls, a violent reminder of the chaos still raging outside. Faces around the table paled, their eyes wide with fear. What was that? Someone blurted out, panic rising like a tide. Ethan slammed his phone down, his composure fracturing. Stay calm. He commanded, though his own voice betrayed him, cracking under pressure. Whatever's happening outside can't breach this room. We need to strategize. Strategize? Jonathan shot back, energy rising within him. We need to know what's happening. What are you really hiding? The courage bubbled up, and surroundings blurred into the mere backdrop of adrenaline. But Ethan's attention shifted. The flicker in his eyes hinted at something more urgent. There's a bigger threat. It's more than just the chaos outside, he muttered, almost to himself, but loud enough for Jonathan to catch. If he finds out, Jonathan's heart raced. Who was the he Ethan referred to? Jonathan. David hissed, pulling at his arm. The insistent tug brought Jonathan back to the present, grounding him amidst the fray. They couldn't afford to lose sight of their goal. We need to get more information. Find out what's going on. But before they could strategize their escape, a shadow crossed the room, and a figure emerged from a side door. Jonathan's breath hitched. The resemblance was uncanny. It was Clara. Her face was painted with streaks of dirt, panic etched deep in her eyes. Jonathan. She gasped, stumbling forward. They're coming for us. We need to go now. A shiver crawled up Jonathan's spine. Who's coming? He barely managed to utter the words, fear lacing every syllable. The room exploded into chaos, voices overlapping in a whirlwind of confusion. Truths and lies entwined, each moment felt like it was teetering on the edge of disaster. What about the decision-makers? Someone shouted. Forget the board. We have to escape. Clara's voice broke through, fierce and unyielding. In that instant, Jonathan realized he was standing at a precipice. The cacophony of the building's unrest swelled, the urgency palpable. He needed to choose: stay and face whatever unseen threat lurked in the chaos, or trust Clara and venture into the unknown. A look passed between him and David, a silent agreement forged under pressure. They had to know the truth, to protect themselves and the others caught in this corporate nightmare. But just as they stepped toward Clara, another crashing sound echoed, this time from the building's interior. A flurry of shouting and more panic erupted, pulling Jonathan back. What had they stepped into? Were they truly ready for the storm that lay ahead? And yet, in that very moment, the stakes became higher than he had ever imagined. As Clara gasped, her eyes wide with fear, Jonathan realized the phone's silence had been deceptive. Who was truly calling, and what awaited them on the other side of that door? With his heart racing and fear tightening like a noose, Jonathan could only wonder what darkness would unfold next. Clara's urgency snapped Jonathan into action. Her eyes were wild, darting toward the door, flickering with shadows of unspeakable fear. They're already in the building, Jonathan. We don't have time to waste. Ethan's face contorted, the mask of authority slipping. What do you mean, they? His anger boiled over, but it was undercut with an icy dread. Are we under attack? Yes. Clara shouted back, her voice rising above the chaos. Childhood friends are no longer the worst of our problems. They've aligned with forces we can't even begin to understand. She pointed sharply at the window, where chaos unfolded outside. The distant clamor of sirens mixed with screams and the echo of rapid footsteps. David turned to Jonathan, eyes wide. This isn't just an evacuation. This is a warning. Clara, who are we running from? Jonathan's question hung heavy, tightening the air around them. They, she pressed, voice cracking, are after you and Ethan. They think you have something. Ethan's eyes narrowed, the glimmer of a secret flashing across his face before he masked it again with defiance. I don't have anything. Tell her that, Jonathan. But Jonathan felt a sickening twist in his gut. What if Ethan's secrets were a part of this chaos? What if his carefully forged empire held the key to why the world outside was falling apart? We need to go, now. Clara commanded, her urgency sparking a rallying cry among the board members. They began shuffling to the door, but Ethan held fast, stubbornness giving way to something darker, something desperate. Wait! He bellowed, his voice no longer authoritative but tinged with panic. I won't let some mob dictate my company's future. I built this from the ground up. You're talking about your legacy while they're breaking down the door. Jonathan screamed back, fear pushing him forward. This isn't about the company anymore. We have to get out of here. The walls shuddered with another bang, louder this time, and the lights flickered ominously overhead. A sense of inevitability hung in the air. A horror was rapidly approaching, and they were powerless to stop it. Clara, take David and go. Jonathan stood anchored in defiance, but fear coiled around him tight. He didn't want to be separated, but distant gunfire and shouting forced his decision. No. We stick together. David shouted, eyes pleading. We can figure this out. We can defend ourselves against whoever is coming. Ethan stepped closer, an edge of authority creeping back in. We can barricade the door. You're all overreacting. This is a misunderstanding. But Jonathan caught the tremor in Ethan's voice, the subtle shake that belied his bravado. How can you be so sure? You know something, don't you? What are you hiding? Ethan's gaze dropped resentment, fear, and something else altogether mixed in his expression. If I tell you, you might not survive what comes next. That was it. The moment of truth hung heavy in the air, poised to spill out. Jonathan felt a desperate pulse of urgency. We don't have time for secrets. We need to know, now. Fine, Ethan bit out, the admission forced from somewhere deep within him. They know about the project. Project Helix. It's why they're here. They think it's a weapon. The mass of confusion erupted anew around them, shockwaves rattling the entire room. Project Helix. Clara echoed, confusion etched into her face. What is that? Suddenly, the door shuddered again, wood splintering, the sound crackling through the air like thunder. Jonathan's heart raced. This was no ordinary corporate mess he'd entangled himself in. The promise of hidden truths had transformed into a ticking time bomb. The question curled in his mind, begging for release: how many lives had the project endangered? As the door lurched hard against the frame, splintering away from its hinges, the light from the hallway danced over a dark form. Shadows loomed near, faces obscured, intent on something dreadful. Jonathan drew in a breath, each second pressing closer than the last. They stood on a razor's edge, trapped in an unfolding nightmare. What awaited them beyond that door? And could truth alone save them from the storm poised to descend? Time seemed to stretch as the door cracked open, the splinters striking like daggers in Jonathan's heart. The light spilled in, illuminating a figure cloaked in darkness, breathing shadows. A collective gasp resonated through the room. Clara tensed, her fingers gripping David's arm. Ethan, who is it? Jonathan's voice was hoarse, tearing through the tension. Ethan stepped back, his skin paling as the intruder stepped closer. I don't know, he stammered, panic clawing at his throat. Not them, not now. The figure was tall, clad in black, eyes gleaming with an unsettling mix of menace and determination. Time's up, gentlemen, the voice dripped with malice, pushing into the room like a toxic gas. We're here for Project Helix. Hand it over, and maybe, just maybe, you live to see another day. Never. Ethan shouted, newfound resolve sparking behind his fear. But Jonathan could see the shifting shadows in his eyes. He was terrified. They all were. This isn't a game. Jonathan thundered, feeling desperation channel through him. They were on borrowed time, and he could almost sense the clock counting down. We won't give you anything. The figure laughed, a sound that sliced through the charged air like a razor. Spare me your bravado. You think you have a choice. The world outside is falling apart, and your little secrets are the key. Do you really think you can fight us? That barricade won't hold for long. A heavy thump echoed from the hallway, a reminder of the enforcers pressing against the door. Each sound felt like a countdown, a hammer on an anvil, forging a nightmarish fate. Clara, Jonathan turned urgently, we have to shut up. She yelled, her voice slicing through the fear. We need to focus. If Ethan won't give it up, maybe we can outsmart them. Jonathan could see it now. Her eyes flickered with strategic brilliance, even in the chaos. He felt a rush of gratitude for her strength. But could they really outsmart someone with such sinister intent? The figure shifted, blocking their path to freedom. Resistance is futile. The more you delay, the more pain you invite. One way or another, you'll regret crossing us. Enough of this. Ethan's voice trembled with defiance, but Jonathan knew it was a fragile facade. You don't know what you're dealing with. Wrong, the intruder shot back, stepping closer, shadows pooling like ink around their feet. I do know. More than you can comprehend. And I have no qualms about making examples of you. A ringing silence fell over the room. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest, racing faster than his mind could catch up. Ethan. What have you done? Listen to me. Clara's voice broke through the haze, her focus sharp. We don't need the project. But we need to evacuate. Now. We can regroup later. Jonathan watched as fear pulsed through Ethan's features, panic mingling with a flicker of desperation. No. There must be a way to negotiate, he insisted, yet his resolve was crumbling as the shadows approached. Before Jonathan could counter, the figure lunged, darkness spilling forth in an electrifying blur. Run! Jonathan shouted, turning and grabbing Clara's arm as they bolted toward the window. Glass shattered as their escape route opened, daylight streaming in like an awakening after a long nightmare. But where would they go? Outside, the chaos was far worse than they imagined. With adrenaline surging through him, Jonathan leaped onto the windowsill, Clara close behind. The distant sirens screamed, an orchestra of alarm amplifying their desperate escape. They didn't know what awaited them in the streets below, but there was no other option. Do you trust me? Jonathan shouted over his shoulder. Clara hesitated, her eyes reflecting uncertainty. We have to do this together. Together it is. With one last glance back, Jonathan launched himself into the unknown. The air rushed past them as they descended into the chaos, uncertainty gripping at Jonathan's soul as they fell into the fray. Would they survive the descent, or would the storm claim them? As he hit the ground and rolled, all he could think was, what a project. Helix unleashed. And what would it take to survive the truth that loomed ever closer? The ground was hard beneath Jonathan's shoulder as he rolled away from the window, a jolt of pain shooting through him. He propelled himself to his feet, scanning the street. An explosion of chaos unfolded, cars overturned, screaming citizens, and debris swirling like a tempest. The air was thick with smoke and fear, punctuated by the wailing of sirens that clawed at his sanity. Clara! He yelled, panic tightening his chest as he searched for her. He hadn't even seen her hit the ground. Over here. Her voice cut through the noise, and he dashed toward her, barely avoiding a panicked crowd surging past. He found her crouched behind a parked car, her eyes wide, reflecting the chaos around them. Are you okay? He asked, breathless. The weight of their situation threatened to collapse on him. Yes, but we need to move. Clara's voice shook, urgency bubbling under her calmness. We can't stay here. They'll find us. Jonathan looked back at the building, shadows already pouring out like a dark flood. The figures from within were no longer just whispers of menace, they were a palpable threat, and they were gaining on them. Where to? Jonathan scanned the park to his right, its trees swaying ominously, offering a possible escape route. But the street to the left was filled with civilians, which could give them cover or get them caught. Let us go left, Clara said, pulling at his arm. The crowd can help. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, echoing against the concrete like a thunderclap. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath before a stampede broke loose. Run! Jonathan shouted, snatching Clara's hand and bolting into the surge of human panic. Each heartbeat resonated in his ears, fueling a primal instinct to survive. They weaved through the crowd, bodies pushing against them, a wave of fear driving them forward. Shops emptied as terrified people fled, darting into alleyways and homes. Jonathan and Clara sprinted, adrenaline causing their lungs to scream as they headed deeper into the chaos, but the shadows chased them, relentless and unforgiving. Jonathan could see glimpses of black-clad figures maneuvering through the panicking crowd, their movements precise, intent. They were close. Down that alley. Clara shouted, pointing to a narrow passage between two buildings. Jonathan nodded, and they veered sharply, slipping into the relative darkness away from the chaos. Once in the alley, they slowed for a moment, pressed against the cold brick, catching their breath. The pumping adrenaline began to fade, revealing the weight of their situation. What next? Clara's voice trembled, the reality hitting her as she looked into Jonathan's eyes. Jonathan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. I don't know, he admitted. But before he could think, a figure stepped into the mouth of the alley, silhouetted by the dim light. It was one of them. The intruder from the building. The same malevolent presence that had shattered their lives. Did you really think you could escape? It hissed, moving closer, the shadows dancing around its form. You can't hide from the darkness. It's already taken root in you. Jonathan felt fear choke him, but beside him, Clara gripped his arm firmly. We have to fight, she said, determination igniting within her. Clara, no. Jonathan pleaded, desperation clawing at his heart. We can't fight that. But the figure lunged, a swift motion cutting through the dark, reaching for them. Jonathan's mind raced. He had to protect Clara. They wouldn't die here. Not now. With a sudden burst of instinct, he pushed Clara behind him. Run. I'll hold it off. Jonathan, don't. She screamed, but he had already set his resolve. Time itself froze as he braced for impact, the shadows swirling, and then it hit him, the overwhelming weight of confrontation. The confrontation wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of a more harrowing truth lurking in the darkness. What more lay ahead, waiting to be unleashed? Jonathan had never felt fear like this. The figure's face, masked and unyielding, drew closer, the stench of darkness clinging to it. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but he stood firm, adrenaline pumping through his veins like a wildfire. The shadow lunged, limbs extending in a predatory grasp. Jonathan, driven by sheer survival, countered with a desperate shove. It barely staggered, but in doing so, it bought Clara precious seconds. Go! He shouted, his voice hoarse. She hesitated, her eyes wide with helplessness. In that split second, Jonathan saw more than just fear in her gaze, he saw resolve. Clara vaulted past him, sprinting down the alley. The fleeting sight of her gave Jonathan a fleeting moment of hope, but a cold hand of dread gripped his heart. The figure lurched, turning its attention back to him. Jonathan didn't wait. He darted forward, using the narrowness of the alley to his advantage as he zigzagged, keeping the figure from closing in. Run, Clara! Keep going! He yelled again, eyes stinging from the smoke that seeped into his lungs. He glanced back and saw her silhouette racing towards safety beneath streetlights growing dim, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Breathing hard, he reached the end of the alley and stumbled into an open courtyard, littered with trash and remnants of a lost day. The air felt different here, alive with the promise of escape, yet it bore the weight of uncertainty. He scanned for Clara, but she was gone from view, swallowed by the night. Then a scream tore through the silence. Clara's scream. No. Panic clawed at Jonathan as the dark figure emerged from the alley, a shadow passing between him and Clara. He wasn't waiting. With reckless abandon, he charged. The figure anticipated his move, swinging its arm out. Jonathan deflected the blow just enough to avoid a crippling hit but stumbled, pain lancing through his shoulder. He fought against it, swinging wildly. Why are you doing this? He shouted, desperate to stall for time. The darkness already has you, it hissed, voice as cold as ice. You can't fight what's inside you. Jonathan's heart sank. What did it mean? In the back of his mind, Clara's face flashed a reminder of warmth, light, and hope. If she could escape, perhaps he could too. With a surge of determination, he sidestepped, reclaiming his ground. "Get away from me!" he screamed, fist connecting with the figure's masked face. It recoiled, momentarily stunned, and Jonathan seized the opportunity. He bolted for the nearby street, searching, desperate for any sign of Clara. The panic and adrenaline merged into one overpowering sensation, drowning out everything else. Just as he reached the street, a deafening crash echoed behind him. He turned to see the hulking form of the figure fall, stumbling back into the shadows of the alley. Breathless and shaking, Jonathan scanned the street. It was like running through a nightmare, the haze of smoke blurring reality, people scrambling for safety, yet no Clara in sight. He felt a twist of despair cut through him. "Clara!" he shouted, voice cracking. His heart raced as fragments of doubt crept into his mind. What if he had lost her? What if he had failed to protect her? Then he heard it, a soft melody wafting through the air, familiar and haunting. It was Clara's voice, singing a tune he had never known she could create, yet somehow, it felt like a lifeline pulling him forward. Jonathan rushed toward the sound, pushing through the crowd like a lit fuse, every face a blur of worry, each moment weighing heavy on his chest. The melody grew louder, more insistent, filling him with a sense of urgency. She was close. As the crowd thinned, he spotted a figure in the distance. Clara, standing defiantly, her back to him. But she wasn't alone. Another shadow loomed beside her, tall and ominous. Their conversation appeared dangerously intense. Jonathan's heart hammered as he pressed forward, fear gnawing at him. Was she in danger again? "Clara!" he shouted once more, fear igniting his words as he broke into a sprint. They turned. Clara's eyes wide with shock, the figure's face a mask of cruel focus. "Stay back!" Jonathan yelled, hands clenching into fists as he prepared to fight again. But at that moment, the shadows shifted, and the situation spiraled as the true enemy revealed itself from the depths of the darkness. What was hidden within the shadows now threatened to engulf them both. The shadows twisted around them as Jonathan reached Clara, breathless and unyielding. The figure beside her, no longer just a specter of chaos, revealed itself to be Ethan, his every feature twisted in anxiety. "You shouldn't have come," he shouted, voice wavering like a taut wire ready to snap. But Jonathan had no time for explanations, only a driving force to protect Clara against whatever menacing darkness lurked behind his former CEO. "Get away from her." Jonathan's voice was raw, powerful with resolve. The air was electric, charged with unspoken dangers. The melody Clara had sung moments ago felt like a distant echo in the whirlwind of fear, yet it anchored him, clearing the fog in his head. Ethan stepped toward them, shadows gathering in ellipses around his feet. "If they see you together, they won't stop." He spat, desperation creeping into his tone. "You're putting us all at risk." "Us?" Jonathan scoffed, disbelief rippling through him. "You mean you? You're the one hiding under your glossy empire, while chaos reigns outside because of your secrets. What did you do?" Ethan's eyes flashed with anger, and behind him, the ominous figure from the alley lingered like a dark storm cloud. "This isn't just about me, Jonathan. It's about all of us. About Project Helix. They're out for revenge, and we're out of time." "Then we face them together," Clara said, her voice steady when Jonathan had felt so uncertain. He glanced at her, admiration swelling. "You think I'll let you drag Jonathan into your mess while I stand back? We fight this." The shadows danced, and from within, the figure broke into a cold, cruel laugh, a sound that sent a chill down Jonathan's spine. "How sweet," it purred, stepping closer, gaze piercing. "The brave little CEO thinks he can shield his secretary. But you should understand, every light casts a shadow." "Shut up," Jonathan shot back, fists clenched tighter. "Your threats don't terrify me. What you're hiding will come to light." Silence fell like a hammer, the tension thick as fog. The chorus of chaos had dimmed, leaving only the palpable fear echoing through the air. And there it was again, Clara's gentle song, wrapping around him like a shield. A crackle of laughter broke the stillness. "You don't know how right you are," the figure said. "But you will. Time's up for you both. Either hand over the project or watch the world burn." Jonathan stepped forward, heart hammering against his ribs. This was no longer just about survival, it was about standing firm against secrets that had twisted too much of their lives. "You may think you can scare us. But that means nothing if we stand united. Courage won't save you," the figure hissed. "It only leads to futility." That was it. Something clicked in Jonathan's mind, an image of the boardroom, the unresolved conflict swirling around him. It became clear, the project was no mere weapon. It was about control, manipulation beyond the corporate walls. The market was merely a front. "I'll find a way to expose you," he shouted defiantly, voice ringing with fervor. "You've lost all power the moment we stand together." Clara's eyes glimmered with determination, and she stood taller beside him. "Jonathan is right. We'll find the truth, and we'll make sure everyone sees." A flicker of uncertainty crossed the figure's face. "You think your voices can change fate?" "Absolutely," Jonathan replied, his heartbeat steady and strong in his chest. "But not alone. Together we can shift the tide." Ethan faltered, stepping back as if caught in a web of realization. "If we expose Project Helix, it'll destroy everything I built." He gasped, staring wide-eyed at Jonathan and Clara. "Everything I've worked for, it'll destroy the corruption that walks your halls." Clara interrupted, her voice ringing with resolve. "You didn't just build something, built an empire of shadows and lies, imprisoning everyone in your wake. Maybe it's time for a new beginning." With a swift motion, Jonathan grabbed Clara's hand, pulling her close. "We move as one. We can face whatever comes next." The figure hissed, moving to block their path, but determination glimmered in Jonathan's eye, fueled by warmth and courage. He rushed at the shadow with Clara by his side, not as a mere soldier but partners in truth. Their combined force shattered the tension, and Jonathan felt an overwhelming surge of purpose. They weren't just running, they were advancing into an unknown that promised discovery. Together, they'd face whatever storm lay ahead. As they pushed through, voices ringing out behind them, the weight of the chaos began to lift. Maybe this fight wouldn't alter the world overnight, but with conviction, they could forge new paths forward. In that fleeting moment before the darkness closed in, Jonathan knew they had found their truth, stepped into the light, and the shadows would never own them again. And standing in that moment of defiance, he felt straightened shoulders, woven with a connection that transcended fear. They could face anything, together. But their journey was just beginning. You all need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button, now, to feed the algorithm. Flood that comment section with your reactions about this thrilling conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this. Let us build this community together.